are lives that become symbols, lives that the world watches, judges, remembers, and sometimes misunderstands. Jacqueline Lee Bouvier, later Jacqueline Kennedy, and later still Jacqueline Onassis. She was never just one thing. Never just a wife, never just a first lady, never just a name in headlines. She was a woman, carrying joy, carrying loss, carrying silence when the world demanded noise. Tonight, we sit with her story. Not the myth, not just the glamour, the real one, the quiet one, the one she lived moment by moment. July 28th of 1929, a girl is born in a house of privilege in New York. It is a house of privilege, but it's also a house full of fracture. Her father, John Vermont Bouvier III, also known as Black Jack, was charming and handsome, and a stockbroker whose fortunes rose and fell like waves. Her mother, Janet Lee, was strong and ambitious, but a mother that was determined to give her daughters what she considered mattered the most: security, elegance, stability, and most importantly, a name that opened doors. But their childhood was something that was not really simple. When they were very young, their parents got divorced. And this is something that at the time was a total scandal. Her and her sister Lee will divide their times between homes, between Manhattan and East Hampton. And yes, her education was very privileged. She was pretty much riding horses before she learned how to walk. She was learning different languages like French and also reading poems and drawing. But behind that old fancy education that most people cannot even dream about accessing to, she was learning something that a lot of people will miss. She learns very early that beauty can be an armor, that poise can hide pain, and that silence can be louder than words. Even though historically we mostly see her side as somebody that was a very aesthetically pleasing feature, like a fashion icon, and somebody that really understood how to portray the right image, this was a woman that had way much more to show and to give than her external appearance. She was highly educated in arts, history, culture, and she graduated from the George Washington University. Before Kennedy and before all the things that we know about her, she was able to actually work as a reporter very briefly. In her work as a reporter, she actually was able to cover the coronation of the Queen Elizabeth II directly. And as she was working for the Washington Times-Herald, she was observing, interviewing, absorbing, and learning. However, at the time, a woman's life was not complete until she was married. And her mother, who we already spoke about briefly before, was very intentional about giving her daughters a good social status, a stability, and a good name to be remembered. Her sister Lee was already married at the time, and of course this added extra pressure from her parents because it was time for her to be married. Little did they know that the daughter that they were so worried about getting married was going to be the same daughter who will forever be remembered because of that marriage. September the 12th of 1953, she marries John F. Kennedy, an absolute rock star. He was a senator, a war hero, and a rising star. The wedding was grand, 600 guests, surrounded with all the high society of New York. But behind those photographers and behind all of that luxury and champagne, there were two people who were not only beginning their life together, but whose lives will change forever. They will also have kids. First, they will have Caroline in 1957, then John Jr. in 1960, a stillborn daughter, Arabella, in 1956, and another son, Patrick, who unfortunately only lived a few days. On January the 20th of 1961, she will become First Lady of the United States, at the age of only 31 years old. This is something that was historical because she was the youngest First Lady in over a century. But it's interesting to me how this is a woman that was able to show her talent, her skills, and her passion on every single area that she had. As soon as she gets to the White House, this is a White House that is outdated, but she sees it differently and she restores it. Not for vanity, not for history, but for dignity. She brings in French antiques, American craftsmanship. She opens the doors with televised towers. She invites artists, musicians, poets. She makes culture feel alive again. Then comes November 22nd of 1963. In Dallas, the open car, the shots, the reaches of him. I love you, Jack. Blood on her suit, on her hands, on her gloves. She refuses to change. She wants the world to see what happened. She wants no illusion. The funeral, 3 days later, on November 25. The world watches. She holds her children's hands. She buries her husband. And in that moment, she buries part of herself. After such a tragedy, she prioritizes the security of their children and she decides to leave Washington and move to New York. Away from the cameras, away from the grief, away from the public eye. Then, October 20th of 1968, she marries Aristotle Onassis, Greek shipping magnate who was one of the richest, wealthiest men alive. But still, her past is chasing her and the world does not give her a break. Unfortunately, cameras and the public eye were all over her the entire time. However, this relationship offered her something that she needed desperately. Not only security, but also privacy. And it is said that he owned like some sort of private island that she was able to go to and just relax and walk away from the world. And I feel like this marriage was probably the break that she needed from the attention, the public eye, the criticism. We also need to remember that in her life, after what happened with John F. Kennedy, her life was never the same as far as that people will not give them the privacy that they deserve. They have paparazzis, photographers all over them. There's also like a big case of journalist or photographer that was just obsessed with her and will not stop harassing her. And it's very, very sad that the world can be a very cruel place and that the people's desire of gossip and knowing what's up with this person or that person makes them forget that these are human beings that have a soul, that have a heart, that have feelings. And this is something that unfortunately she dealt with almost her entire life. This last relationship seemed to have a lot of beautiful memories. It is said that they were living between Paris, New York, and Scorpios. But the tragedy unfortunately returned to her life, and in the year of 1975, her husband Onassis dies. And after his death will come her third phase of her life, and I think is probably one of the most interesting ones because this will be the part of her life where she will 100% focus on her talents, her skills, and everything she has to give. She first becomes an editor at the Viking Press, and then she worked for Doubleday. I was able to watch some documentaries and interviews that they did to people that personally met her and that were able to work with her at the time. And it's very beautiful to see how most of the people have this pattern and they all agree that she was such a perfectionist and such a highly skilled woman and just a very, very smart person. And it makes me wonder if things were different for her. How would it have been if she would have experienced and continued nurturing those talents and those skills from early on in her life, from her first marriage all the way to the end of her life? I can't help but wonder what else we will have been able to see of her work and her talent. Her very last years, she had a very quiet life and a very private life. It is said that she kept, let's say, her heart and her life in New York, and that she saved the Grand Central Terminal from destruction. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's something that I found. And on May 19 of 1994, at the age of 64 years old, she dies. They say that she died very peacefully, surrounded by her children, her books, all the things that she loved, in a very peaceful way. What remains is just not a myth, not just Camelot, not just a story of somebody that was a fashion icon, which she was, obviously, but there's so much more in there. And I think her story is a story mostly of resilience. What it remains is a woman that loved deeply, lost deeply, who carried grief in public with a dignity few could match. She rebuilt her life, not for applause, but for herself, for her children, and for meaning. And I think her story is important because we live in a time where vulnerability is usually mistaken with weakness, and also strength is considered some sort of perfection. And I think her story is important because she's a good example that you can be elegant at the same time that you can be broken, that you can be public at the same time that you can be fiercely private, and that you can mourn and you can still create. And most importantly, I think she's an example that you can lose everything you love and still create something out of it and still have yourself. Life is full of dynamics and changes, and sometimes priorities will go from one place to another, but our ability to create and the fact that we were put into this world with a mind and a heart and a soul means that we're not only here to follow a script, but to also create and leave something behind us. The most important thing about it is the ability to move on and to carry on and to keep going, regardless of the grief and the pain. And I think that if you have experienced the loss of a person that is very close to you, you probably understand this feeling very well. It's something that is definitely not easy at all, but sometimes the best way to overcome the pain and to overcome the grief is just go through it. And I think it's a very beautiful story. But let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there's anything else that you will add to the story that is important to point out. And what else do you take from her story? I can't wait to see what you guys think. Also, if you have any other people that you would like me to talk about, this is the channel for it. I'll be more than happy to do so. Please remember to like and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here once again. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.